Meeting number 17 of the House of Commons Committee on Human Resources, Development and Social Development and for Persons with Handicaps. Pursuant to the motion adopted on June the 18th, 2025, the committee is meeting on government mandate and key priorities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Participants will be in the room or appearing virtually. Before we begin, I would remind all members to please silence your devices, as well as choose the official language that you wish to participate in this meeting. Using the headset in front of you, virtually click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language that you're going to participate in. Please refrain from tapping on the microphone boom for the benefit of our translators. And if there is an interruption in translation services, please get my attention. We'll suspend while they are being corrected. To do that, use the raised hand icon if you're appearing virtually. Please address all questions through I, the chair, and wait until I recognize you by name before we proceed.
Okay, let's get her going, bud.
Before we begin, I want to just remind the committee that I have received confirmation that the Minister of Housing is unable to appear prior to his scheduled December the 4th appearance, but he's confirmed on December the 4th. So with us today on government mandate on key priorities, we have the Honourable Minister Patty Hajdu, Minister of Jobs and Families, and appearing with her is from the Department of Employment and Social Development, Paul Thompson, Deputy Minister, and Sandra Hassan, Deputy Minister of Labour and Associate Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development. Minister Hajdu, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Je suis heureuse d'être ici avec le représentant.
I'm pleased to be here with representatives of ESDC to underline the essential work that we're accomplishing in order to strengthen our economy, to protect good jobs, and to give Canadians the tools they need in order to succeed in a rapidly changing world.
Trade disruptions, economic change. This work is fundamental to the progress of our nation. Canadians are counting on us to meet this moment head on and build a stronger Canada for today and for generations to come. So today I want to talk about how we protect, empower, and build together. Workers and industries across Canada, especially in trade-exposed sectors, remain our first priority. When layoffs happen, it's not only disruptive to families, it impacts communities, and, of course, their entire region. That's why we moved quickly on our response to tariffs, including flexibilities to the EI work-sharing program, keeping skilled workers on the job, and preventing nearly 12,600 layoffs. We've also made it easier for Canadians to access EI more quickly and extended EI by 20 extra weeks for 190,000 long-tenured workers. Additionally, we're investing $50 million to modernize Job Bank so Canadians can connect to good jobs faster. This goes hand in hand with driving our economy forward. This means securing industrial peace, strengthening partnerships and alliances across the workforce, and equipping workers with the tools that they need in a changing labour market. Essential to that are stable labour relations and fair collective bargaining. Les meilleurs accords sont conclus à la table de...
The best agreements are made at the bargaining table, and the federal government plays a key role in these processes thanks to the federal conciliation and mediation processes through these services. 97% of disputes are resolved without work stoppages.
To building millions of new homes. We are backing this ambition with strategic investments like the Union Training and Innovation Program that grows Canada's skilled trades workforce. Parallèlement, nous attirons les meilleurs talents.
Parallel to this, we attract the best talent by accelerating recognition of foreign credentials and simplifying the process so that qualified workers may contribute more quickly and assist in building Canada strong.
Generational. They will shape our future and ensure that every generation has an opportunity to succeed. That's why we've also committed $1.54 billion in youth employment programs to support 175,000 young people, including youth with disabilities. And this is on top of the $3 billion we transfer every year to provinces and territories for similar work. The government is also focused on bringing costs down for Canadians. And that's why we're expanding programs like affordable childcare to give parents more choice and families more economic power. Across Canada now, the average cost is $16.50 per day, with most provinces and territories having reduced fees by 50%. Nearly 1 million families are benefiting. Women's workforce participation is at the highest level ever in the history of this country, over 85%. And we're also making the National School Food Program permanent. Today, nearly 400,000 children are benefiting from school food programming supported by federal investments. The government is also improving financial security for hundreds of thousands of working-age persons with disabilities through the Canada Disability Benefit.
Is she not
and
over
Budget
her time?
2025 provides an additional $115 million over 4 years for a one-time $150 payment that will help with disability tax credit application costs.
She's got to be done. Her
Mr.
5
Chair,
minutes by
this
now.
is the work of building a fairer, more resilient Canada, one that protects workers, empowers families, and builds a strong future for the next generation. And I look forward to our conversation today.
Oh, finally.
Thank you, Madam Minister. We'll now begin with the first 6-minute round of questioning.
Garnet first.
Beginning with Ms. Falk. Ms. Falk.
Oh, come on. Garnet's in here.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for making time to be here today. All families deserve equal access to parental leave, but adoptive and intended parents remain at a disadvantage under our current EI system. In the previous Parliament, I introduced a private member's bill to create a new 15-week attachment benefit that would deliver parity for adoptive and intended parents. It is also recognized the importance of securing early attachments and the role that support plays in healthy long-term outcomes. As you know, my bill did not receive the royal recommendation it needed to proceed. Instead, your government introduced its own version of the bill, copied in principle, but with one critical difference. It would only come into force on an order in council. So despite that, the measure received unanimous support in the House, and Bill C-59 received royal assent on June 20th of 2024. However, it's now almost a year and a half later, 17 months, and parents are still waiting for this benefit to be rolled out. Parental leaves have come and gone. And in the meantime, with families continuing to miss out on these important additional weeks with their kids, and Parliament unanimously agreed that they should have this. Time is a precious commodity for any new family. So adoptive and intended parents simply want the time they deserve with their children. Minister, on what exact date will adoptive and intended parents finally receive the equal access to the leave that Parliament had promised them?
Thank you very much, people, for that question, but also for the advocacy for adoptive and intended parents. I've just been consulting with my deputy. That work is underway right now. I don't have an exact date for you, but I look forward to continuing our work together.
What concrete steps have been taken in the rollout of this benefit?
So the work is happening with the department to plan for that benefit, and I hope that when it appears in a budget forthcoming, that you will vote for it. In fact, your party has a
If you can't
record
provide a
of
date
voting
today,
against
can you
the measures
please tell
that
me when you
advocate
can
for.
provide a date that this will be rolled out?
We'll certainly be.
It's been 17 months.
We'll certainly
we
be
did
working.
the work. I did the work. My office has done the work on this.
Sorry, we have a point of order.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry, I think it's very hard for the interpreters when the minister or when the speaker is being cut out and there's two people speaking at the same time.
Thank you. I would remind all members to be conscious of the interpretation. Ms. Falk, you have the floor.
So we did the work for this. We had an end date that it would come into force. Your government copied the bill in the principle and then failed to deliver it. So your government had misled adoptive and intended families that this was going to happen, and it hasn't happened, and you can't provide me a date of when this is going to happen. That's unacceptable. When is the date that intended families and adoptive families can expect this?
If you're interested in continuing this work together, you have my commitment that we'll include you in the work.
But that's, Minister, I can't say that is a true statement. Your party voted against this bill when I brought it forward. Your party refused to provide the royal recommendation that was needed for this bill to proceed. And then you copied the bill in principle and have not implemented in 17 months. Some of these children are now almost 2 years old. It's completely unacceptable. When is the date that this will come into effect?
Member would know that private members' bills that require the government to spend money are usually not adopted, whether it's from a Conservative member or from a member of Parliament from the Liberal government. So your question is a bit disingenuous, Member of Parliament. I will say this, though. I've just made the commitment to you that the government intends to uphold its commitment and that we will work with you.
I'm moving on to another question. Does your department have an internal timeline that it is using to guide the implementation?
Department is at work right now on looking at
more than 17 months then?
I certainly will ensure that you're kept abreast of this work, MP.
That wasn't the question. Man, she's frustrating.
With all due respect, Minister, this isn't an entirely new program that is being developed. This is literally mirroring the maternity benefit that women who birth a child receive. And adopted and intended parents already contribute to the EI system. They already have access to the EI parental benefit. And adding an additional 15-week category should not require months, and in this case, almost years of delay. So, Minister, if this issue is not political, can you just be honest with the families that are still waiting as of why they are still waiting, if this is not a political issue?
I look forward to your support when we do introduce this, whether it's in a budget or another measure, and I certainly hope your party will vote for it.
It was in the fall economic statement in 2024. That was a long time ago, and there's been no movement on this whatsoever. I think that's absolutely unacceptable. Would you not agree that that's unacceptable?
I have made the commitment to you, I think repeatedly now, that we'll make sure your office is included in this work.
Okay, thank you. Minister, has ESDC completed all internal investigations into ESDC employees who fraudulently applied for CERB while fully employed?
Turn to you.
Yes, we have completed.
All completed?
That one.
How many ESDC employees in total were investigated for improperly receiving CERB?
I would have to get back to you with the total number investigated, but
please provide that
the total
information to
number
the committee.
that we took action against was approximately 50.
And you'll provide that information
Yes.
to the committee?
Yes.
Okay. So how many were cleared and how many had security clearances revoked and how many were formally terminated?
Again, that information is available. I'd be happy to provide it to the committee. It was approximately 50 employees that we took action
and
against.
One last question. Were any cases referred to the RCMP or other law enforcement agencies for potential criminal investigation? Please provide that information.
Yes,
to the committee.
We can provide that as well.
If so, what the status of those referrals are, please.
Donc, Ms. Koutrakis pour 6 minutes.
Here comes 6 minutes of bootlicking.
Ms. Kourakis, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Us here today for the full 2 hours. I look forward to hearing more and learning more about all the important work that is being done behind the scenes. And thank you to the officials for also joining us today. Minister, in your opening remarks, you mentioned modernization of the job banks. And I'm just wondering if you can, and of course it's part of the tariff response, how is the new system helping workers find jobs faster, and how has uptake changed among EI recipients?
Well, thank you very much. That's a great question, and I think it's one of the sort of quiet successes of the action that we've been taking, in particular through the result of the tariff hits that many industries are facing. As you know, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've been transforming EI to rapidly respond to some of the most difficult situations, the sectors that are the hardest hit. And one of the tools that we've been using is making it easier to sign up for Job Bank, automatically connecting people through EI to the Job Bank, and ensuring ensuring that people are able to utilize the tool fully. And we're seeing an increase. In fact, 35% of the recipients are now using Job Bank, which is a huge growth from, around a 10% mark prior to that. So the information that they receive is, useful for them in terms of looking for a skills match within their own region, for understanding what the landscape looks like in their own area. Obviously, we are also doing a ton of work with affected employees in terms of work sharing, though, and I think for us, the best solution is when employers are able to be retained by a heavily hit industry or employer, and that's where work sharing comes into play. So ultimately, being able to retain those skilled workers is what employers say they need the most. But there are, unfortunately, smaller employers that may not be able to retain their workforce, and in those cases, Job Bank can make a big difference.
And Minister, have we heard any success stories that this is actually working? Are we hearing from some of the stakeholders telling us or providing us with feedback how this change is either helping or they foresee it helping in that regard?
Yes, both on the side of the employer and on the employee. So on the employee side, in fact, sometimes folks haven't known about Job Bank and haven't seen the power of Job Bank. There is an opportunity to directly apply to an employer. We are actually even going further to transform Job Bank so that soon employees will be able to get feedback on their application. One of the things that many employees have spoken about, or job seekers have spoken about, is that they send their resume through one of the other job search apps. They don't hear back. They don't know what has happened to their application. People are reporting they're getting a much better sense of response from employers on Job Bank. And on the employer side, they're really finding it efficient to be able to use Job Bank to reach the broadest set of employees that are well-trained and well-suited for their work. So resounding support and success, I would say. I think there's more that we can do to use this digital tool that's going to even bring its efficiency higher. And it's, again, a credible source of information for employees and worth promoting within each of our ridings as a tool for job seekers. Why don't you just give me one of the binders?
We often hear about the youth and the issues they're going through unemployment. And we know that they've become an important driver of public policy. What processes or consultations did the government use to gather input directly from young Canadians, and how did that feedback shape the youth employment measures we see in Budget 2025?
We do a lot of consulting with youth. In fact, on many different programs, whether it's youth employment services, there's a constant quality feedback loop. We work with a lot of partners, as you know. So, for example, the youth employment strategy that offers training through not-for-profit partners and many other partners provides us an opportunity to not only meet and engage with youth, which the department does on a regular basis, but also some quality feedback around what those programs have resulted in. I was really impressed when I met with a young man just last week in Calgary, a man named Juan Vargas, a youth who was so thrilled to see the Youth Climate Corps in the budget. He's with an organization called the Climate Emergency Unit, and he said he felt that it was their direct advocacy that resulted in something that they could recognize in the budget. So whether it's a program like that, or whether it's Skills Link, or whether it's Canada Summer Jobs, there's a constant feedback loop with young people about what supports they might need. And the last thing I'd say is, you might remember a number of years ago, we funded something called the Future Skills Center. The Future Skills Center is driving innovation in skills development and talent, and they regularly intersect with a number of different youth and youth-serving organizations to make sure that what employers and trainers are designing actually relates to what youth are saying is the most helpful.
20 seconds.
20 seconds. So, Minister, we've heard a lot about the major projects and the jobs estimates. Can you give the committee a sense of how the jobs are being created and the level of investment these projects are bringing into the economy right now?
Well, absolutely. And, I was very proud to stand with the Prime Minister at the announcement of the first tranche of major projects that have been selected for review just a few months ago. and in fact, the Canadian Building Trades Union was there in full force, standing with us. And I think it was an indication of the value that building trades see in the investment in major projects. Of course, we will need thousands and thousands of skilled trade workers to be able to build these projects, not just the major projects, but the housing that's planned and that's already underway in many communities across the country. And
thank you, Minister.
Yeah, you're done.
It's
Stop
going
talking.
to create great
Well over.
opportunities.
Thank you. Madame Gill, pour 6 minutes.
MP Gill, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here with us today, and also the Parliamentary Secretary. I have a lot of questions, but of course we've covered a number of topics which often are tied in with the provincial jurisdiction. On my side, I would like to talk about federal jurisdiction, in particular one topic which is a priority for the Bloc Québécois. My colleague Thérèse de Blainville and Louis Chabot tabled a bill on employment insurance, and they'll come back to reform that, reform which you said you wanted to carry forward with since 2015. When I see you, I'm talking about the government party. So I'm asking whether you are going to vote in favor of this reform that, of course, you have been wishing to make since 2015 once the bill is brought forward. Thank you.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It's premature for me to say yes or no. In the case of a bill which I have not read
I think it's important that
as yet,
Je devinais un peu la question.
I guessed at that, but the bill has been introduced in 2024 in November, so it would be pretty much the same thing. And in fact, it would solve all the issues of the various stakeholders have requested. So it won't be a surprise. There have been consultations, I think, since 1996, since the Axe-worthy reform. You've no doubt conducted consultations since 2015, so it's no surprise. It's a bill that responds to demands, including the black hole, which is really an important one for the entire population, in particular in seasonal industry workers. In any event, when you vote, Minister, the bill will go to committee and then it can be amended. And of course, in employment insurance, we need to have the assent of the governing party. So I would like to know whether you're prepared to vote to send it to committee for study and for consideration, and also to take it under your wing to ensure that it is voted on and implemented quickly. So from that point of view, I'd like to hear you answer yes or no.
I would not offer resounding support of a bill I haven't seen yet. I think it's important that we work together, though. And if you're interested in working with my office, we can build on some of the things that we've already done to transform EI. Maybe they're in the bill you're talking about. For example, extra weeks for long tenured workers.
Je vais arrêter, Madame Lepage, j'aurais beaucoup de questions pour vous.
No, but I would have a lot of questions for you. But when we do vote, the first vote in the House is a vote in principle. So I imagine that as the government has been promising this for 10 years, that the government would be willing to say, sure, let's send it to committee. So it's not a matter of whether you've read it or not, but the principle is reform employment insurance, which is indeed a commitment of the government. Even if you were not minister then, I cannot say that you have been there in that capacity since 2015, but it's a theoretical priority of the government. So I would like to get a positive response that, yes, as a matter of principle, we're in favor for reform. But what I understand that you're saying to people who would like that, in other words, the unions, the employers, to say that we're not even willing to send forward a bill that does the government's work to a committee to debate it and amend it in order to make a reform that has been delayed.
That we wouldn't or would. What I've said is that it would be irresponsible for any government to agree in principle to sending a bill forward until they've seen that bill. I also have been a minister for 10 years, and I can tell you that there can be all kinds of things in bills that may or may not be feasible, and we look forward to seeing your bill, and hopefully we can support it, and there is a greater likelihood of that if we work together.
Oui, j'espère aussi.
Yes, I hope so too, and I would like the government to introduce a bill? Is it really something you want to do to bring forward a reform, whether it's in the mandate letter of Mr. Carney that is very general? We don't know exactly where the government is headed. I heard your introductory speech and read what's being done. And we talk about employment insurance. You've talked about some measures that I'm sorry to say are kind of Band-Aid measures that are, for example, like temporary measures right now that have ended, which put people in a difficult situation because there were arbitrary dates used in your plans. You really have a willingness. And of course, you're the one who can answer because that's your profession of faith toward yourself. So I imagine you trust in yourself. Do you plan to table a reform of employment insurance in the next 4 years as your labor minister?
Measures that are really helping workers right now. For
Je parle
example,
plutôt, Madame. Je m'excuse, Madame la Ministre. Je parle plutôt.
I'm very sorry, Minister, but I'm talking about your promise from 2015 that was reiterated in various electoral platforms by your party, which stated that you wanted to implement reform. It's been 10 years now that you've been telling people you want to implement that. I'm asking in the 4 coming years, are you planning to do that in this term to fulfill that promise to Quebecers and to Canadians over the past 10 years by your government?
That we didn't wait for legislation to change a number of measures that have been advocated for a very long time, including, for example,
on parle d'une réforme. C'est pas ce que
Mr.
les
Chair,
gens veulent.
if I could just finish my
En fait,
statement.
We're talking about reform. You're saying no, Minister, so I think that the answer is ended, and I can move on to another question. We can go to Canada Post, which is also a matter of interest to me because, of course, there are workers. We've told the government that they're going to create jobs, but now they're being cut back, and now there are Canada Post workers who, in June, we know that a strong increase, in fact, in the losses of 253 million is due to that month of June when Purolator announced a 65% discount on its services. And keep in mind that Canada Post has 91% of the shares of Purolator. I know that your government, among others, there was a number of questions asked of it to implement. I'll come back to that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Goodrich, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here today. So since 2017, baby formula has risen 84% in Canada, according to StatsCan. And yet, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's risen by only 42.9%. Why is the inflation on this product double in Canada, and does that concern you?
It does concern me. It does concern me when a product like baby formula, which is not easily replaceable, is that expensive. And we've had a number of exchanges in the House. Obviously, there are things that the government can control. There are things that the government cannot. One thing we can control, though, is increasing available money for individuals who are needing to purchase baby formula.
Has this been discussed at Cabinet?
In fact, Health Canada has actually made some regulatory changes to make it easier to get baby formula into this country, and I would encourage you to ask the
I'm well aware.
Minister.
I actually advocated for that when we were dealing with the formula shortage before. And what I have seen from this government, from the last government, for the last 10 years is no action, no real care. We are in a crisis. Parents are paying $50 for a container of baby formula. In 2020, that exact same container of baby formula cost $29. The amount that your government is providing to families has not gone up by that percentage. So you can't continue saying, oh, but we're giving all this money to families. We need to deal with the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is food is too expensive. And baby formula is not replaceable for families that rely on it. It is absolutely irreplaceable.
So, Mr. Chair, in fact, the Canada Child Benefit, which your party has voted against any increase since 2016, has kept up with inflation. It is one measure that has deeply alleviated poverty for children in this country. In fact, between 2015 and now, 2019 actually, child poverty rates declined by 42%, and we continue to see an alleviation of poverty through a number of measures. You have an opportunity, Member of Parliament, to stop fighting against families. Families know that there are challenges.
With all due respect, Minister, 84% increase in 8 years on baby formula, that is far, far higher than CPI. So no, you have not done what you need to do. And the real problem is that we are reliant on imports for baby formula. in Canada, massively, massive imports. It took Health Canada months to get their act together to allow us to import baby formula from Europe when we were in crisis. Families were scraping by. There are families right now that are buying baby formula in open tubs because that is the cheapest way for them to do this. I've had families contact me saying that they are buying what they know is stolen formula. Baby formula is one of the number one stolen food items. It is kept under lock and key in Canada.
And against the increases to Canada Child Benefit, against the kinds of things like early learning and childcare.
Because they're not working.
As we pointed out.
If they were working, 1 in 3 kids would not be the clients at food banks.
In fact, if they're not working, their Canada Child Benefit is actually even higher. So for 0 to 3, those children
That's not
would be
enough to
receiving
cover
up to
the difference.
$7,000 or more a year in Canada Child Benefit, and yet indexed to inflation, and you vote against it time and again.
But
so I'm just curious why you think that extra money wouldn't be helpful to a family that you're describing.
What I am saying to you, Minister, is the inflation on baby formula, because your guys' government has refused to do any real action to make anything better on this file. And when I ask about this in the House of Commons, do you know what I get? School food program. Babies don't go to school. Families that rely on this do not have another option. There are countless families, whether they're adoptive, whether they can't breastfeed for some reason or they choose not to. This is their only option for feeding their kids. And your government just keeps saying, we're giving all this money. Why can't families figure this out? Well, this is a failure on your government, period.
Well, actually, in fact, one of your members of parliament derided our socialist programs just the other day to talk, when we were talking about things like the Canada Child Benefit. We understand that the school food
when you
program
go
doesn't...
to other places... No, that's not a point of order.
Appel au règlement. Vous parlez
decisions,
en même
Ms.
temps.
Goodrich.
Trop d'interruptions, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président.
Continue. I would ask all members to please respect the translators who have to translate your comments and conduct.
If the translators have a problem, they will ask the clerk. The clerk will relay to the chair. You can
So
shut
I guess
up.
I'll go in a slightly different vein. Have you discussed this issue with the Prime Minister? Yes or no?
Prime Minister and I regularly discuss affordability.
Okay, have you specifically talked to him about baby
The Prime
formula?
Minister and I regularly discuss affordability. In fact, I am grateful that the Prime Minister has kept affordable programs, all of the care programs, intact in the budget that you voted against.
I have Madame Gill, a point of order.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, once again, I have a concern for the interpretation.
Inaudible.
We're being told that it's often inaudible. So I hope we can have enough time on either hand.
Merci,
On va faire le
Madame
rappel,
Gill.
le micro n'était pas allumé.
Thank you, MP Gill. The microphone was not on, I'm told.
Time to question, but I would ask them to respect the fact you ask a question and give an opportunity for a reasonable start and an answer. You have the floor, Ms. Goodrich.
So very specifically, Minister, have you specifically talked to the Prime Minister about the inflation on baby formula and the crisis it's creating in families? Yes or no?
Budget 2025.
No.
Budget,
I asked yes or no.
budget. I have spoken with the Prime Minister extensively about affordability issues that
Specifically
families are
baby
facing.
formula?
And that's why in Budget 2025, all of the care programs are protected. All of the affordability measures are protected. In fact,
So
there's
I-
a tax cut for 22
Thank you,
million
Minister.
Canadians that you voted against.
so I guess
it's
the
a
answer-
bit rich to
Goodrich,
say that the
Ms.
Prime
Goodrich.
Minister...
Ms. Goodrich, Madam Minister, your time has gone over, and I did pause for all the points of order. But then again, I remind, one cannot dictate to the witness what the answer should be. You can phrase the question as you choose. It is the witness that chooses to provide the anser.
And it's the members' time, so they can reclaim their time.
Madame de Rochier for 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes.
This guy needs to go to the Senate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. First of all, I wish to thank you really for all the advocacy work that you've done in order to maintain in the 25 budget all the affordability measures that really assist our families in facing difficult times when they need it. And I wish to thank you for that on behalf of all the families in my electoral district and those of my colleagues, including my colleagues on the other side of the table. I would like to know if you began by giving yourself some time to conclude your thoughts earlier.
A little bit about some of the reforms to the employment insurance that have already been done over the last few years, and I was wondering if you could start with some of that.
Merci beaucoup. C'est un grand honneur pour moi.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to work for Canadian families across the country. It is a time where there's a lot of anxiety. There are a lot of differences around the world now with the tariff war and the impact on Canadian families.
We knew this would happen. In fact, as we saw tariffs increasingly being applied to Canadian families and to Canadian companies, and that's why we took immediate action early on in the spring to transform EI very rapidly to address any situations of layoffs or instability. Two things. One, we wanted to make sure that companies who have workers that have skills that they wish to keep employed would be able to do that. And we've been able to apply work sharing in greater numbers for companies that allow for the retention of their employees with the support of employment insurance, where companies can not only keep their employees, but keep those skills. Because if you've ever run a company, there's nothing more dangerous than losing your entire workforce and then trying to go and call them back. Oftentimes, those people are no longer available, and that company is even further set back. So this was about not just families, but also the stability of the sectors. We also eliminated the waiting period for workers. So usually there is at least a 1-week waiting period, and we eliminated that waiting period. You can get EI the moment you're laid off, and you can keep your severance pay. So oftentimes before, severance pay would be, your EI would be held back based on any vacation pay you had accrued or other kinds of payments. Now you can keep that money. And so people are able to put that away or hold on to it or pay off some bills, whatever the case may be. There's also longer periods of pay for long tenured workers, up to additional 20 weeks for long tenured workers, because we know for those folks it might be harder for them to re-enter the workforce, and they've been paying into EI for quite some time. And these kinds of measures are both helping employees that are impacted, but significantly protecting employers who often are doing the hard work of pivoting to a new product, a new service, a new approach, and don't want to lose their employees that are really skilled and really adapted to their workplace.
Maybe keeping on the job side, so we were very happy when we saw the latest report from October from Statistics Canada, around the 67,000 new jobs that were created in October. Unemployment rate is down at 6.9%, much better than expected. You mentioned Build Canada Home earlier and all of the jobs that is going to create. Can you talk a little bit about other initiatives in Budget 2025 that will really drive jobs across communities all over Canada?
Yes, and you're right. We've seen some really good numbers for 2 months in a row. I would say that we're holding stable, and they're much better than economists had predicted. And I think it's because of the ambition of the country. In fact, Canada is rated the second best place for direct foreign investment after the United States. These are great numbers, and it's a result of the investments that we're making in ourselves. And whether it's major projects, as the Prime Minister has announced, and as we have seen are really starting to come to fruition with the support of the Major Projects Office, whether it's investments in building homes, the announcements in Budget 2025 around infrastructure investment. And I come from a semi-rural community. It's important that communities that are small have things like community centers, recreation centers, libraries, seniors centers. In fact, even in my riding, we've in the past funded things like relining public pools so that not only do people have opportunity for work, but they want to stay in these communities. And so we're really making sure that every dollar we spend is actually going to generate jobs. And I think Budget 2025 has the ambition that the world is taking notice of.
And Madame Rocher, Madame Gill, for 2 minutes.
Ms. MP Gill, for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you once again, Minister. there were some questions I wasn't able to complete. I have another one, though. I'll move on to another topic, the forestry industry, because on a number of occasions you've stated that there's a lot of job creation. We know that 40,000 public servants are going to be laid off. So this is not job creation, as was mentioned so well by the CLC. And also we have the forestry industry, of course, in Quebec. It is a pillar of our economy. Your government and the Prime Minister, among others, said that forestry workers ought to renew their skills. So from Saguenay, Lac Saint-Jean and Abitibi and the North Shore, where we've had losses, I think in my case in Port-Cartier, 100 jobs lost last week. So we're telling people to look for new jobs, new skills. What should we tell those people? That doesn't give them a new job. So does that mean the government is completely dropping the forestry workers?
Well, absolutely not. In fact, in the lumber sector, we have 3,000 positions on work sharing, which means that companies are using the EI work sharing measures. You were talking about EI earlier. Companies have found this a very useful tool to protect their workers while they reorient.
Minister, when it closes down, what do you do? When there's lack of support for the government and they close down, the government doesn't agree to provide subsidies, for example, wage subsidies to keep people in their job like we did in COVID, which businesses are asking for, nor do they lance on the anti-dumping and countervailing duties. Getting a new job, re-educating, that means your job doesn't exist anymore. Find a job somewhere else. In the regions, that's very difficult. Often those are places which have a single industry and we need development more. So I'm asking, what do you tell them when the government says to re-educate themselves for another job, when you tell them that their industry and jobs is lost for good?
To come from a lumber producing area, and I'm well aware of what happens when a lumber mill goes down, when a pulp and paper mill goes down. I fully understand how difficult this is. And that's why we haven't waited to take action. That's why we are working to make sure that employers...
You're not answering the question, Minister. I cannot say that you know, because you're from a forestry region. You know how difficult it is. What I'm asking is whether your government has abandoned the forestry industry, and what do you tell our people, that they've lost their jobs forever? That's my question, because I also come from a forestry area and we don't respond in the same way to the forestry crisis.
Do you want me to?
Thank you, Ms. Gill.
No, we have to move to, you can address it at a follow-up question if you choose. Mr. Janis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. Minister, Budget 2025 proposes to, quote, generally limit access to the Canada Student Grant for full-time students to students attending public educational institutions and not-for-profit private institutions. Could you please explain to us why the government is proposing to withdraw student grants from students attending most career colleges and other kinds of institutions that are private?
Well, thanks very much. In fact, most programs are currently ineligible through career colleges. Programs that are 2 years and under have been ineligible before. What we want to make sure is that the public money goes to public institutions, for one, and for two, that we can reduce the practice by some career colleges of extending programs from 2 years to 4 years so that students are eligible, and yet it takes them longer to graduate, sometimes without any further accreditation.
Thank you for your response, Minister. I guess I would say back that this money doesn't go to the institutions, it goes to the students. And there are programs like to become a chiropractor, to study traditional Chinese medicine, where there simply aren't very many, if at all, opportunities to study this at public institutions. So I don't think anyone's accusing those programs of being artificially extended. I mean, you can't become a chiropractor in 1 year of study, obviously. What would you say to a student who comes from a lower middle income background, aspires to one of these careers, recognizes there's demand for that career, and is concerned about the budget measures which say that they will no longer have access to grants that students studying at any university would have access to?
What I would say is that we are ensuring that students who need financial support continue to be able to do so. We are making sure that Canada Student Grants are available to students that need that. The minister will have an exemption.
Respectfully, Minister, you're not, though. Like I just gave you the example. You've got a low-income young person who says, I've always wanted to become a chiropractor. Through no fault of my own, the institutions that offer that course of study are organized in a certain way. And because of a change in this budget, I will no longer be eligible for student grants. You've got people that rely on the services that are provided by folks in this area. What would you say to them? Because you're clearly making a change that makes that student no longer eligible for grants that anybody else would be eligible for going to a different kind of program of study.
Well, I would say that if the profession is concerned about the changes in a circumstance where it's a very narrow circumstance like you're describing for chiropractic, that the minister does have an exemption authority, and I'm happy to work with the applicable programs. But I can say that what we do know is that there is a higher default rate for student loans for career colleges, that we have seen in some cases students graduating from 4-year programs that used to be 2-year programs, and that ultimately we believe that public funds should go to public institutions.
Yeah. Respectfully, Minister, I mean, my mother was trained as an occupational therapist. When she did it, it was an undergraduate program. Now it's a master's program. There are many, many, many university programs that used to be available for shorter durations of study or used to be available at the undergraduate level that are now master's programs. You're describing a phenomenon of extension of the requirements of getting certain credentials. I think that's an interesting issue to discuss, but it is clearly not an issue unique to the career college world. It's an issue that has been much discussed in the context of universities as well. And it seems to me that this budget has made a political choice to single out those students, and it's not a small number, those students pursuing particular vocational programs, and say you will no longer be eligible for these programs, even while anybody who studies at a university will still have access to those grants. Why are you singling out students pursuing programs that the government doesn't want to fund anymore for discrimination in the grant program?
I think the political choice that was on display for all Canadians to see was your party voting against $1.5 billion in student supports and youth supports. Canada student loan increase, interest forgiveness. The Conservative Party voted against students, voted against
That's
youth
just not
people
an answer, Minister.
time and again. And I think that's
I know
the
we
political
disagree, but
choice
can you
that's
answer
on,
the question?
on display
These
here.
are serious questions on behalf of students who will
Thank
be
you,
discriminated
Mr.
against by
Janis.
this policy.
Your time has gone by. Ms. Fancy for...
Thank you very
5 minutes.
much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today. I know in our previous question line of questions, we were talking about bigger kiddos. Well, myself, as a former educator, I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about littler kiddos in regards to early learning and childcare. So, Minister, I know I ran within my election about the importance of community and what that can be, and how do you have a thriving community? Well, I guess my grandfather always used to say that you take care of the young and you take care of the old, and everyone else in between will take care of themselves. So in terms of children, I was wondering if you could talk to us about the impact of affordability with childcare. Right? There's also a broader economic benefit here. I was wondering today if you could speak to us about how the expansion of early learning and childcare is supporting workforce participation, especially for moms like myself, and what the long-term economic impact of these investments look like.
Well, thank you for, I think, a really great question about something that's quite historic in this country. Affordable childcare. Many economists had talked about this for a long time and talked about not only the value of this to young brains, as you're talking about, and young children, but the economic policy that it represented. And I mentioned in my remarks, we have the highest workforce participation ever in the history of our country by women. generated in large part because of affordable childcare. We have, on average, about a $16.50 day rate. In some cases, provinces have reached $10 a day. In other cases, they're working to get there. We have families participating regardless of income level, and although some people have criticized this, in fact, women lose a high degree of productivity capacity when they are staying at home. It's a choice for sure, and I respect it. In fact, I think I might have taken that choice had I been able to do so, but I was a single mom and relied on affordable childcare to be able to pursue my ambition and to be able to support my family. And in fact, that's what we're hearing. We're hearing families say this is a game changer. Fees have gone down in some cases. I was at a public event, and a woman came up to me, and she was a professional, and she said, look, we're saving $800 a month on each child. So $1,600 a month, that's back in their pockets as a result of affordable childcare. So it's also a huge affordability measure. I've read quotes in the House of Commons. People have been able to pay down their mortgage. People have been able to save for a house. People have been able to go back to school. All the while, provinces and territories are doing a fantastic job keeping quality in the system. And we've worked with a network of professionals, as you know, to make sure that that quality remains. And I'm really just want to give all of the provinces and territories a huge kudos for the work that they're doing to get this all lifted off the ground.
Yeah. I agree about the momentous occasion that this program has allowed for people with all walks of life throughout Canada. I was wondering a little bit along the same theme, if you could also talk about in terms of reducing fees for families, but also creation of new childcare spaces under the federal and provincial agreements. I know I was at one of the announcements for Small World Childcare Centre. That's a shout out for South Shore St. Margaret's there a little while ago about that program, as they were one of the recipients. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I don't know which is on or off anymore. Sorry, translators. It is me. Okay, I'll just leave it alone.
Yeah.
It's on. It's on right
Yes.
now? Okay, great. I don't need to touch it. This is what I've been told. Great. Yes, you're right. The lift for some provinces and territories, in particular in rural areas, has been difficult. Obviously, rural doesn't have as much capacity, and that's why we've not only funded sufficiency for spot creation in public systems. We've also had a blend of public and private care in cases where there is no public option. We understand the need to protect that public system, but we also understand the need for flexibility for small regions that may not have other options. So we've been working really collaboratively with our provinces and territories to get that done. We've also funded physical infrastructure spot creation. Sometimes it's been a matter of actual hard spaces. And we've also supported the development of early learning and childcare students. I had the ability to visit one of the programs in my own riding and meet some of the students that are coming into the program because, of course, labor and jobs is a huge input into the program. And so, there are a number of ministers, for example, in Saskatchewan, the education minister said that, they've had some asks from Saskatchewan's perspective, and they've been grateful for the collaboration so far. And that was our intent, was to collaborate with provinces to really understand what their needs were.
Thank you, Ms. Fancy. It's 5 minutes. And I just remind you, the mics activate on their own and go. Yeah. So Mr. Reynolds for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. This government's actions have been speaking much louder than its words when it comes to supporting unionized labor and its use of Section 107. Traditionally, Parliament would convene to end a strike, and through that process would provide a rationale to Canadians as to why they're sending employees and employers to binding arbitration. During the Air Canada flight attendant strike, you noted on Twitter that you would be invoking Section 107 to send Air Canada flight attendants represented by CUPE and Air Canada to binding arbitration. Personally, I would be willing to vote in a special sitting of Parliament to ensure that Canadians are informed on why strike action is being ended. This was a very drastic step. Why do you choose now to use Section 107, or this government choose to use Section 107 repeatedly instead of bringing these labor disputes to Parliament?
Thank you very much for your question. And first of all, I'll just note that 97% of the disputes that come to the Federal Mediation Service are solved without any work stoppage at all. And I just want to give a huge congratulations to the FCMS. They're incredible individuals that are doing this work every single day with bargaining parties. In terms of support for labor, I would note that although I understand your question, what we have done since we've taken office in 2015 is actually strengthen the rights for unions. And in fact, one of the first acts I had the privilege of passing, although others had done some work on it as well, was a bill that reversed the harmful Harper-era legislation that made it harder for people to bargain and organize 377 and 525. It was a huge ask of the labor movement. We immediately got to work, and it was the first piece of legislation we actually passed in the House of Commons in 2015, was to protect unions' right to organize.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to move on to my next question. We recently saw Stellantis use foreign labor for the construction of the Nexstar battery plant in Windsor. It shut out Canadian tradespeople, and Stellantis has recently hinted that they're planning to move Canadian jobs in the auto sector down to the United States. This government gave them billions of dollars of taxpayer money and Canadian market access, and all we've gotten in return was jobs for other countries. What is this government doing to protect Canadian tradespeople?
I think that the support of the Canadian Building Trades Union, both of our budget and of the Major Projects Office and approach, is really an indication of how building trades are seeing this government act in their interests. And I would say that building trades in particular, unions across the country know that it's important that we protect Canadian industry and we protect Canadian workers. In fact, the Buy Canada announcement was celebrated by a number of unions, including Unifor, including LiUNA. And I think the union movement knows that we will continue to have their back. We're working with the Building Trades Union right now on the significant skilled trades shortage that we see across the country.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to move on to my next question. This government has been speaking a lot about its Buy Canada policy and nation-building projects. Recently, this government announced the next group of projects that are being considered by the Major Projects Office, and which includes the KSI LISM's LNG project. Now, what I find interesting about this is that this project is majority owned by a U.S. company and is to be built by Samsung Heavy Industries in South Korea and floated over to BC. This is more jobs for other countries. If this government isn't supporting Canadian labor with Canadian materials or Canadian companies, how is this project a Buy Canadian national building project?
So I will just remind people that the projects that have been announced have been referred to the Major Projects Office. And the Major Projects Office knows that the priority of the Government of Canada is to make sure that Canadian workers and Canadian companies see the benefit. I will also say that that is a majority Indigenous-owned company. And so there is am I right on that? Indigenous ownership. Indigenous ownership is actually a priority of the Major Projects Office. I think everybody at this table knows that there will be a significant opportunity through the major projects that have been announced as referred to help ensure that there's a job creation across this country.
Does that mean this won't get built? It's strange to me that it even got referred if it's going to be built out of our country.
What I would say is that every major project will be that has been referred to the office is a project of national interest that the Government of Canada will be looking for ways to support. The Major Projects Office has an important job, though, to do, which is to make sure that the project is viable, it's economically viable, that it uses Canadian labor, there's benefits to the Canadian economy, and that there is benefits to Indigenous people.
Thank you,
and I would just say
Reynolds.
that
Mr. Reynolds,
we're on the cusp of some exciting
You don't get to say any. You don't get to keep going.
But I will hold you close to the time. Monsieur Joseph, pour...
Mr. Joseph, for 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister, my beloved colleagues started by raising a question, and I would like to give you time to continue answering. and the security, what the government has done and continues to do to support the forestry sector. What have you done to support the forestry sector?
Yes, well, aside from the actions that my colleagues are taking in terms of the work to try and ensure that we can lift the tariffs and that we can have a return to tariff-free trade, that I can't speak extensively about because I am not the holder of those portfolios. On my side, it's about protecting companies and protecting workers. And I'll give you a good example. We are really working with companies that are threatened, not just because of tariffs, but market changes, like Cap Paper recently, who was on the cusp of having to close their doors, needed some time to come up with an alternative approach or product that they could pivot to. And we were able to support that company in Northern Ontario, very remote, and all of the subsidiary companies that depend on that company buying the wood to ensure that they could actually stay in business while they pivot to a new product. Now, it remains to be seen what their business plan will uncover, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to be there for that company. We're also there for workers. Workers who are impacted are benefiting from work sharing. If a company can keep those workers on, we'll pay for part of their wages through EI, and that keeps that worker attached to that workplace. But we are also making sure that EI is easier to get, whether it's ensuring that there's no waiting period, that people can keep any severance that they are entitled to, or if they've been a long tenured worker, that they get extra weeks so that they have that stability while they're seeking a job.
Thank you, Wee Cookie, for the super chats.
I have another question. Recently, on social media of the bloc members, we've seen calls for application for an employment program. Is it a real program or is it through Employment Canada?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I don't.
Récemment.
Yes.
Recently.
Yeah.
We saw on social media of certain bloc MPs calling for applications for summer jobs. Are they talking about Summer Jobs Canada, or is it a different program? Is there a difference between those programs?
Sorry, je comprends maintenant.
Okay, now I've got the message. We have a program, Summer Jobs for students.
Available for every region of the country. It's federally funded. This summer, in fact, we're adding almost 35,000 more jobs. So it'll be 100,000 Canada Summer Jobs across the country in a variety of different sectors. And each member of parliament, chaque député, avoir une liste pour...
Each member of parliament will have a list of jobs that are proposed for their company. I don't know if I still have a minute, Chair. Sure, one more minute. A minute 30. Eliminating job possibilities or providing employment opportunities for handicapped people was a priority, especially with the National Job Strategy for Handicapped People in Canada. The question is simple. Could you explain the overall approach adopted by the government to help eliminating obstacles to jobs for these employees and enforce or strengthen their participation in jobs in Canada for handicapped people around the country? Yes, it's very important, and often there are a lot of people who have forgotten about people with disabilities.
And we make sure that we have programs called the Opportunities Fund, for example, that actually works with employers that are willing to match with a person with a disability. And that provides the employer the support to bring in a person with a disability and the person with a disability the opportunity to get a job. We also support many organizations around the country that work with people with disabilities who are looking to find a job, improve their job skills or their ability to apply for a job or be seen by an employer. And indeed, with our youth employment program, many of our programs have a specific focus on youth with disabilities. In fact, about 17% of the youth that take advantage of those programs are people with disabilities. And that's intentionality. We have to be intentional about this work because so many people forget about the needs of people with disabilities, and people with disabilities are some of the best educated in our country.
Madame Gill, pour 2 minutes.
MP Gill, for 2 minutes. Ms. Gill, 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you once again, Minister. I would like to talk to you about Correctional Services Canada and, in fact, correctional officers whom I acknowledge on the North Shore in Port Cartier. Mr. Guillaume and his colleagues were talking about job creation, but when it comes to correctional officers, there's a lot of fear and dissatisfaction, of course, with the 15% cutbacks that have been announced. And also, I'll give an example of retirement funds where pay negotiated by correctional officers will now be reduced. So they're changing the pay for workers when it had been negotiated, and they decided to send it into the pension fund, and now they've decided to cut back the retirement income. So I'd like to know how you can explain this backsliding for correctional officers, for example, in relation to the pay that they negotiated. Why does the government want to take away what belongs to them?
I think this is a question for another minister. I'm sorry, I'm not. Doesn't fall in the role of the employment minister or the labor minister.
Je pense que tout est un peu.
I think that it cuts across when we talk about workers. For example, for the federal pension funds, it can concern the Treasury and also the industry. But I imagine that the weight of the ministry is important when it comes to this. What they're doing now is they're reducing the quality of the jobs for people who have been working for the public service. So when they start cutting back, of course, the employees, they talk about cutbacks of 40,000 jobs, but they're also cutting back in fringe benefits and retirement funds, and it reduces the quality of jobs. And I think that is a responsibility of the minister in the department, and that's the question of job quality. I would like to hear you on that. And I could have talked about the CX4s, who are also correctional officers, but who also do management work and who are they're having their purchasing power reduced year over year, year after year, because there's a matter of some negotiations being settled with some of the CX1s, 2s, and 3s, but not the CX4s. So they're in the process of cutting back further and not solving things. I'm very sorry, but it's difficult to ask a question when you're not listening in order to try to get an answer. Do you want me to repeat it?
No, I don't.
Okay, so both at the same time. I think that's all, Chair.
No. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
An answer in writing. Could we get the answer in writing, Chair? It would be appreciated. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Gill.
Written answer, that would be helpful.
I can say this doesn't fall under my area of responsibility. I would say that this is a public safety question.
Okay.
And obviously
the
labor code
Merci,
applies.
Madame Gill.
Thank you, MP Gill.
We will move to Mr. Janis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, is the government planning to increase EI premiums in the coming year? You said...
your mic's not on.
Right. No, there's an annual process that the EI commissioners undergo, and so we'll have more to say.
Yeah, it's ultimately the decision of government. I know there's a process by which recommendations are made. So just to understand your response, are you saying no decision has been made yet, or are you saying the government will not increase EI premiums?
What I'm saying is that we will wait to hear what the commission says.
Okay, so you're not prepared to rule out an EI premium increase?
What I would say is the chief actuarian will advise the government, and we will listen to the experts and determine the next steps at that time.
Okay, but the government will make a political decision ultimately in response to whatever feedback they get. So it sounds like you're saying that you would be open to either possibility based on the advice you get. Is that correct?
What I would say is the commissioners set the rate, and we will have more to say in September when that happens.
Okay, I would say that based on the situation in the economy, the challenges around employing people, that it would be a terrible time to increase EI premiums, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more feedback on that. My next question is, has Sheikh Ibrahim Memon Madani or an affiliated organization, Darul Uloom Canada in Amherst, received funding from your department?
I would not know that. I would have to ask the department to look into that information.
Okay. All right. There may be a funding agreement signed in October of 2025 with that organization. I'd appreciate if you get back to the committee in writing on that. Would you be able to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. I had previously asked you about how the budget pulls student grants for students at career colleges. You noted that this budget change could be reversed or partially reversed through a ministerial exemption. I wonder if you can clarify if the government is planning a ministerial exemption to reverse this change or parts of this change, or if you just meant that as a kind of hypothetical possibility.
No, there is in the budget, there is ministerial authority to exempt certain programs.
Yeah, so my question is, are you planning specific exemptions? Or
I'm interested in hearing from interested parties what programs ought to be exempted, and then we'll take according action.
Okay. What I'm hearing from interested parties is that you should simply not undertake this change at all, rather than holding out the theoretical possibility of an exemption, because it sounds like you don't have any immediately planned. I want to also note that the budget says that this particular change would effectively be a cut in outlays to students of $1 billion. Would any proposed exemptions reduce the savings, or do you think you can make exemptions and still stay within that $1 billion figure?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to engage in hypothetical mathematics right now. I think what we need to hear is what the proposed exemptions might be, and if there are
that
exemptions
answers my question. You're saying it's hypothetical, so that answers my question, which is you don't have any exemptions planned.
Not any asked for yet. So if you do have parties that are interested, please have them contact my office. I'm very interested in speaking with them.
Okay. Again, I don't understand the rationale for the change at all. So why make the change and then undo it with maybe some exemptions that would change the budget numbers?
I will point out to the MP that the default.
I wanted to get one more question. Sorry, just before the end. You have announced in the budget a Foreign Credential Recognition Action Fund, so-called. The government already has and has had for a long time a Foreign Credential Recognition Program. Is this a second fund to do the same things the first fund is supposed to be doing and not doing? Why the existence of a new parallel fund? As opposed to increasing the amount in the original fund or making changes to make it effective?
It's a different kind of approach that supports provinces and territories who are largely in the space of having the key to foreign credential recognition.
That is what the first fund is supposed to do.
So this fund will support provinces and territories to share information, to be able to work with the regulatory bodies, to be able to more quickly improve their processes.
Minister,
so that they can make
I hear what you're saying, but that
efficient.
is exactly the mandate of the previous fund. So could you tell me precisely what is the mandate of the second fund that's different from the first fund? Or do you have two funds that are doing essentially the same thing?
I think the previous approach was much more focused on individuals that were seeking to have their credentials recognized, and that will continue, by the way. People will be able to apply for loans to help with the administrative and financial costs of seeking foreign credential recognition. But what we are in, as I would remind you, is an unprecedented time where we are seeing real challenges and real commitment by provinces and territories to do this work together. And in fact, it's on my agenda
later. There are real
later.
challenges. I don't understand why you have two funds.
We're now moving to Madame de Rocher for 5 minutes.
MP de Rocher for 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I would like to go back to the question of forestry that we talked about earlier. As you know, as Parliamentary Secretary in Housing and Infrastructure, I have visited a lot of prefabricated companies that do prefabricated work. A couple of months ago, I was in a business where they had entire walls made out of Canadian wood. And I know that our commitments have doubled for the rate of construction, which helps the forestry industry. And in fact, I met with workers of Arbeck who expressed their thanks for the government's actions, for the measures being brought in, even though I know that times are difficult for the forestry workers. Could you tell us a bit about the measures that are being brought in by the government to protect workers in the forestry industry now while we're going through this difficult period?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. We have done a lot of things for employees who are affected by
I think the tariffs.
The tariffs in the U.S.,
dans le secteur,
particularly
forêt.
in the forestry sector.
In addition to some of the EI measures that I spoke about earlier, which I can repeat, but I won't in the interest of time, we've also committed an additional $500 million through provinces and territories for training in the tariff-exposed sectors. So forestry being one of those sectors. And why is that important? Because, you've spoken about modular housing, but there's also, for example, people that produce timber and lumber that may not be suited for the specifications and the building codes that need that lumber. And so those mills are rapidly transitioning to new equipment, new product, in some cases new market, and in many cases that means new skills for employees. And we've been there to support provinces, territories, and employers with being able to help their employees rapidly upskill. Again, the worst case scenario for any company is if they have to lay off a whole bunch of employees and then try to find them again when their business restarts. Those employees disappear into the labor market, their skills get stale in some cases, and it gets harder and harder for a company to actually have the workforce that they need to be able to restart. So this is why an approach that keeps workers attached to the workforce and supports them with our training needs is so important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you talk a little bit about how Budget 2025 expands the union training and innovation program? Because we've been talking a lot in this committee about the importance of skilled trades and ensuring that we prepare the workers for the work that's going to be needed in the coming years with all the projects we have as a country. So if you can talk a little bit about that, that'd be helpful.
Yes, and actually, the union training program has been a really important pillar of the approach that we have in building up skilled trades. Unions do a fantastic job of training and helping young people through the process of getting from apprentice to Red Seal. My son is actually a skilled tradesperson. He's with the operating engineers. And having watched his journey from joining the union to becoming a Red Seal crane operator, just really impressive to see what unions do to get young people these skills. Not just young people, by the way. Many people go back to the trades after completing a course of study at college or university because these jobs are so high paying. We've supported the unions to accelerate that training and attract more people to the trades because, as you point out, there are hundreds of thousands of tradespeople that are due to retire in the next 5 years, leaving even a bigger gap between what we need and what we have in terms of the skilled trades workforce. This budget also includes another $75 million for unions in a way that they have asked for that will help flexibly support them with the space that they need. In some cases, unions are doing this training in very cramped or age space, and it will allow them to use these monies in a more flexible way so that they can not only attract people, but get people through the skilled trades. And I'll just, give a huge shout out to all of the skilled trades in the Canadian Building Trades Union, as well as many others that are doing this important work every day. It is very important that young skilled tradespeople or people that are studying the skilled trades have a place as an apprentice so they can get those hours and complete their apprenticeship. And so for that, they work closely with employers to make sure that employers are able to receive those apprentices. And so this is really an all-hands-on-deck moment. The government has to support unions. The unions have to do their great work training new apprentices, and corporations have to commit to having apprenticeship in their work plans.
Merci, Madame de Rocher.
Thank you, MP de Rocher.
Yes, for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on this discussion about skilled trades, I do think there's a real disconnect between what you're saying and the reality of the policy. Now, our party has been pushing for increases in support for union training. And I'll mention as well, polytechnics educate the majority of people in the skilled trades. Polytechnics Canada has called this budget a missed opportunity. And they're wondering, I'm wondering, why did the government choose to put a whole bunch of new money into attracting foreign talent to universities, but chose to completely ignore, to leave out polytechnics? We have the attack on career colleges, but then also the complete absence of support for polytechnics. Why was that the choice made in this budget?
We have been working with educators of all different stripes for a number of years supporting education. In fact, our investment in research and education is unparalleled. And I will point out your party has voted against it every single time. I will also say that
I voted against the budget. Could you answer the question, though?
I would also say that it is important that we recognize the incredible value that unions have in skills training. And I mentioned part of that.
100% agree, and we'd been pushing for that long before you did it. But could you answer the question, please?
Why did you vote against it then? I'm really curious to know why you voted against the Canadian Building Trades Union, who celebrated this budget and said that it was a generational investment in the skilled trades.
Minister, I'm not going to play this game. I'm happy to justify my vote on the budget in the appropriate fora. This is your opportunity as a Minister of the Crown to answer important policy questions. Why were polytechnics that educate the majority of people in the skilled trades, why were they completely left out while significant new money was put into universities?
I think that our record on investing in post-secondary education both supports for individuals, as we've talked about, but also supports for research, science, and education.
But Minister, this is precisely the point, is that when you talk about post-secondary, you're only thinking about universities. And this is a big issue when we're dealing with the shortages in the skilled trades and the need for parity of esteem here. That whenever you think post-secondary, you think universities only. And I'm trying to ask you about polytechnics, about career colleges, and frankly, this budget is attacking and undermining support for those institutions. So specifically, not on post-secondary in general, but specifically on polytechnics, on career colleges, on where young people are gaining this vital vocational knowledge and experience. Why the decisions in this budget that move against those critical institutions and the students who go there?
One of the elements of the budget was an increase to student work placement, something that universities,
not
colleges,
my question,
and
my question is specifically about polytechnics and career colleges.
Right, and so polytechnics use student work placements extensively to support their students to make sure that they're gaining the skills that the employers need. I just want to read you this quote, though, from Leuna. Leuna welcomes the government's continued commitment
Minister,
to
I'm going to jump in
union-led training and workforce.
I think this is revealing enough. You keep trying to go off in unrelated directions when I'm trying to ask you about polytechnics and career colleges. But anyways, we've heard you on that. I want to ask about Canada Summer Jobs duration. So the average duration for Canada Summer Jobs is 8 weeks. Now, I talk to a lot of employers, and generally speaking, if you're hiring a student for the summer, you're trying to hire a student for the summer, not half the summer. What it looks like when the government shortens the duration of these jobs is that you're trying to artificially show a high number of jobs created when in reality most employers would and most young people would rather have a job for the full summer instead of for half the summer. Could you explain to us why the approach of your government is to kind of fund half jobs as part of this program?
All across the country, 100,000 students are going to have jobs this summer. That's almost 35,000 more students.
But on average, they're going to have job for half the summer.
And I would point out that not-for-profit organizations, community businesses, small businesses, all kinds of different organizations are thrilled about the Canada Summer Jobs opportunity that provides them a subsidy of the
Minister,
wages that they would pay.
Can you just answer a very specific question? I'll give the floor back to you, but it's a very specific question, and the public will see whether you answered it or not. I'm asking specifically about 8 weeks. Because if you gave an actual summer job to students, then I think employers and students would be happier. Why the average 8-week duration?
I would say that this allows for a broad diversity of jobs and opportunities for youth across the country. 100,000 jobs this summer. This is 100,000 young people that are going to get to participate in a small business, in a not-for-profit, in a community recreation center, in a senior center. And I will say that corporations and not-for-profits look forward to applying every year, and I certainly look forward to seeing the stories come from your riding, and hopefully you'll share those.
Thank you, Mr. Janice.
I don't see it being reduced to 8 weeks. I think he's just saying on average that that's what the program administers.
Thank you.
Mine was 4 months,
contracted for 5 minutes.
That was like 4 years ago.
Workers are key in helping take care of our loved ones when they age, like my father, who is 94. And I am fortunate enough to be able to provide him with the care that he needs. We know that many families cannot.
You make $200,000
and
a year.
I'm just wondering if you could update the committee on the federal measures recently introduced to support personal support workers, both in terms of wage increases and the new tax credit available to workers across the country.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you point out something really important, which is that most people who are aging need some kind of support at that age, at 93. And I hope that when I'm 93, that I have some of the incredible talent that we see across the country helping me at 93. I hope I make it to 93 too. But I will say I've had the pleasure of meeting these support workers now across the country. I went actually and visited with some on Labor Day to hear their stories about what they were doing. And they were working on Labor Day. They weren't marching. They were taking care of people's parents and people's loved ones. Often the poorest paid in the economy. The care sector economy is something I'm personally very interested in digging into and working on. And this credit was something that the SEIU, a union that organizes personal support workers, had advocated for on behalf of their members. And so you mentioned that this is in the budget. This is an $1,100 credit every year that will go directly into the pockets of personal support workers. When we announced this, one of the recipients of the credit, but also one of the members at the announcement said she felt that it was the first time that she had actually been seen. Now imagine that. She's doing this work every single day on behalf of her community, on behalf of all of the people that she's doing this work every single day on behalf of her community, on behalf of all of the people that are needing her care, and she doesn't feel seen. Members will be able to contribute through. Members will be able to contribute through an RSP and have a contribution from the union, helping them grow the safety for their very own retirement. So this is an area of the economy and the sector of work that I think deserves our focus, and I'm really pleased to partner with the SEIU in supporting these members.
Minister, we've also heard across the country from many, many people and stakeholders on the Canada Dental Care Plan, which has been described as one of the most significant expansions of healthcare in a generation. Could you provide the committee with an update on how the program is rolling out across the country and what the early results look like for Canadians who previously couldn't afford dental care? And before you respond, I have to share a personal story. There are quite a few dental clinics in my riding in Vimy and Laval. And on one of the visits that I made with a previous Minister of Health, there was an elderly gentleman sitting in a dentist's seat. And he got out of his seat because he wanted to come and shake our hands with tears in his eyes, saying what a difference this has made in his life. So I'd be interested to hear what you are hearing, the impact that this program is doing, and how we're faring across Canada.
It is something that I know I'm incredibly proud of to Member of Parliament. It's just just such a transformational thing for people who haven't had dental care in so long. I've worked extensively with a number of the different dentists in the early days to make sure they understood the program, that they could sign up. Now we have the majority of dentists are signed up and receiving Canada Dental Care patients, and it is a game changer. In fact, I can't go to an event without someone talking to me about the changes it's made in their lives. Oftentimes it is older people who don't have benefits and don't have coverage, and for the first time in 10 years, in some cases 20 years, they've had their teeth cared for. Not only have they been in pain, but there's a high degree of shame as if you have dental decay. And for younger people, it's actually it can actually prevent your ability to land a job. I worked for years in public health, and one of the campaigns that we had back then was about actually an affordable dental care plan, because it was an actual inhibitor of employment for people who had severe dental caries. And there was a pilot project at that time somewhere in Ontario that demonstrated that if you could repair people's teeth, they actually had an easier time landing a job. So this is an asset for Canadian families. Young people that are aging out of their parents' care don't have benefits yet in their career. I was in that place myself. It's very tenuous to be in a position where you have a job, your job doesn't include benefits, you still need care. And so this is a game changer for so many Canadians across the country, and it's great to see the number of people who have signed up for dental care, but who are also receiving treatment.
Tracus, Madame Gill, à vous pour...
MP Gill, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, Minister, as speaking as a block member, at the beginning earlier, you said that regarding labor, that it might be under a different department and that it wasn't your department. So at the same time, based on what I've heard since the beginning of your appearance here, we've talked a lot about issues of jurisdiction of Quebec and of the provinces, and yet the government doesn't seem to mind going into that area. So the limitations are fine when it's to our advantage, but when there are federal issues, I talked about post-employment insurance, correctional services, Canada. I'd like to come back to Canada Post and lost jobs. I didn't have time at the beginning of the meeting to complete based on that idea. 250 million in June. There's really a problem with my microphone, Chair. I don't know if I can, because the sound keeps cutting out. So regarding Canada Post, 250 million in losses recorded, but at the same time, there's a discount in Pure Later of 65%, and Pure Later belongs to Canada Post, 61% ownership. So I have the impression that there's something going on there, that they're absorbing Post Canada to some degree. So I would like to have an idea, Minister, if you consider whether or not Canada Post is harming itself.
I don't feel that I have the ability to speak about an independent Crown corporation's business practices, but I can say that we're there to support the negotiations between the union and the corporation, and we are encouraged by the last news that they have arrived at an agreement in principle.
I understand, but in any event, I could do this without mentioning Canada Post and say that if a company owns another company that is harming its own company, I think we're dealing with a truth, well-known secret. So suppression of inclusion and people with disabilities, this has come up several times. I met with a number of groups, and they're concerned about it. Even if you say that, sure, we're going to work with people with disabilities, we touched on that earlier, but to them, it's a strong signal of ignorance about their situation and their needs. So I would like you to be able to explain to us the reason why a decision was made not to have a Department of Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities. As you know, when there's an issue in any field. Thank you, Ms. Gill. Thank you, Chair.
We remain focused on inclusion of people with disabilities, and there wasn't a separate department. I do also have a parliamentary secretary who assists me in this work.
Thank you, Minister. Merci, Madame Gill. Mr. Seaback for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your opening statement, Minister, you talked about how important fair bargaining is, yet you used Section 107 preemptively to order the flight attendants back to work under their existing contract and took away their right to strike. How do you square that circle that you care about fair bargaining when you took away the right to strike, which is an integral part of fair bargaining?
I'm not sure if you were in the room when I mentioned that the first piece of legislation in 2016 that I had the pleasure of finalizing. It was the first piece that we introduced was to reverse the union busting bills of Stephen Harper, 525 and 377.
But with all due respect, that's not my question. My question is, based on your statement you just made earlier today, how important fair bargaining is. How can you say how important fair bargaining is and take away a union's right to strike? By ordering them back to work.
I think I've also mentioned that 97% of disputes that arrive at the Federal Mediation Service are resolved without any work stoppage at all.
Do you know how tone deaf you sound to flight attendants when you won't answer a direct question and you tap dance around with other statistics? You ordered flight attendants back to work under their existing collective agreement before they even exercised their right to strike. It was preemptive. And then you have the audacity to come to this committee and say how important fair bargaining is. How do you justify that to the flight attendants, that you care about fair bargaining, but you ordered them back to work and took away their right to strike?
I think the best deal is the deal that the two parties arrive at the table. And I've been clear about that. And
Except
in fact,
in
our
that
party has stood up for that. Not
Except
only
in that
have we
circumstance.
reversed union busting legislation that Stephen Harper presented and that many of the members praise, but we've also, as you know, passed anti-scab legislation.
Which we voted for.
Which is great.
Yeah, great.
And that's exactly what we would hope, we would see all parties stand up for collective bargaining rights.
How do you justify your belief in fair bargaining and the best deals are made at the table when you took that away by eliminating the collective process and ordering them back to work under the existing collective agreement?
Look, there are very few disputes that result in the need for government action, and I believe that governments of all stripes have found themselves in this place where both parties declare themselves at an impasse. That is exactly what happened.
You've used it 8 times in 14 months. No other government in the history of this country has done that.
Well, in fact, there was a lot of labor action under
No, there was only one
government,
Section 107.
I will just say this. Section 107 says that the minister, where the minister deems it expedient, may do things to secure industrial peace. What do you say to the organized labor members that are working in auto plants or other kinds of facilities or other kinds of organizations? What do you say when there is labor disruption that impacts the entire economy
the flight attendants,
of Canada?
I don't think the auto sector is not affected by a flight attendant strike.
These are reserved for extremely rare circumstances.
Okay, Minister, you put out a video on Twitter on August 16th where you said nobody should be expected to work for free. Do you recall that?
Sure do.
Great. You had a meeting with QP Air on July 3rd, 2024. They told you that they are unpaid for pre- and post-flight activities. You met with them on July 23rd. They told you they are unpaid for pre- and post-flight activities. You met with them on August 12th. They told you they work unpaid for pre- and post-flight activities. You met with them on August 15th, and they told you we are unpaid for pre- and post-flight activities. Then you order them back to work under their existing agreement, which continues them being unpaid for those activities. And then you put out a statement saying nobody should work for free. You knew they were working for free. They told you in those meetings. Are you familiar with the term gaslighting? You just gaslit every flight attendant with that video. Or are you saying that when they told you they worked for free, they were lying to you?
What I said was that we would conduct a probe to understand the perspective of flight attendants and the industry.
Did they or did they not tell you in those 5 meetings I mentioned that they worked for free in pre- and post-flight activities?
In fact, in those 5 meetings, many things were discussed.
But was that
indeed,
discussed?
Including the impasse that they found themselves at.
Was that
they
discussed?
They needed to resolve in order to get to a new collective agreement. And I will point out that 2 days after this was referred to the Industrial Relations Board, the parties did agree. And so the collective agreement...
Because they wouldn't follow your order.
Are you saying that the flight attendants signed a collective agreement that they don't agree with?
No, they did.
Have a collective agreement now.
They defied your order, but you didn't answer my question.
But they did sign a collective agreement, and you just said that they're still...
Did they advise you in those 5 meetings before you ordered them back to work that they were unpaid for pre- and post-flight activities? It's a simple question, just yes or no. Did they advise you of that?
There were many things discussed in those meetings. And I would say that one of the things that was discussed
I can't wait to put this testimony to the Flight Attendants Union when they come. You won't even answer a simple question as to whether or not they advised you of that.
I asked the Labor Department, to our knowledge, have there ever been any complaints of unpaid work? And in fact, the Labor Department could not find any.
CUPE ran an entire campaign on unpaid hours.
Thank you, Madam Minister, and Mr. Seaback. Thank you. Monsieur Joseph, pour 5 minutes.
MP Joseph, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Minister. There are programs in Canada that was made permanent by the legislation. The budget brought this in. Can you inform the committee of the impact of those programs on families, the positive impact?
Thank you very much for the... C'est un nouveau programme pour le gouvernement.
This is a new program for the Canadian government with the provinces and territories. That's very important. Frequently, there is a program in a given province or territory, and often
les enfants.
It's not sufficient for all children. This program improved or added a number of supports for what the province or territory is doing in their education system.
It's a partnership with provinces and territories. But you've probably visited some of those schools where you're seeing young people getting a healthy breakfast, or maybe it's at lunchtime. I certainly have, and we're getting incredible reports back from provinces and territories, as well as individual school boards and families, the difference that this is making. On average, it's saving parents about $800 a year, but it also gives you that freedom from worry, whether you're a lower income parent or whether you're a middle class parent. People forget lunches. There can be times where students show up and they haven't eaten breakfast that day, and this school food program is really leveling the playing field for education. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Speaking of families, we often hear about the impact of childcare services on financial affordability, but there are also economic advantages that are broader. Could you talk to us about how the expansion of education for young children or early childhood fosters participation in the labor market, particularly for mothers, and the economic impact that that has in the long term for these investments?
Absolutely, and I would say that early learning and childcare is an economic policy. It's about making sure that people can get to school, get to work, and be able to not worry about their children while they're doing that. Obviously, it also is a huge affordability measure. And I mentioned that families are saving sometimes $1,500 a month for a family with 2 children. That $1,500 can go towards purchasing food, enrolling their children in school. Some families have reported saving up for down payment on a house or paying their mortgage. And so the relief that we're hearing from families across the country who, on average, are paying $16.50 a day, some provinces $10 a day, some just slightly higher, is incredible. And I will say that this is supported by all provinces and territories, regardless if they're a conservative province, a liberal province, an NDP province. Provinces and territories see this as a huge economic driver for their own economies in their provincial systems, because the more people they can actually support to be active in the workforce, the better the outcome.
Justement, Madame la Ministre, on va parler du système.
Minister, the Canadian system of early childhood education is one of the most important investments in Canada. Could you inform the committee about the progress achieved across the country as regards reduction of costs to families and the creation of new spots in daycares?
Absolutely. That's been the work that we've been doing with the provinces and territories as we have worked to expand their systems. It's work we have to do together because provincial authorities have the jurisdiction over where childcare will be offered, how it will be licensed, a number of different criteria around regulations for employees. But we've been there to support not only the investments needed to create those spots and bring down costs, but physical infrastructure costs, supports for training of early learning and childcare workers, making sure that provinces and territories have what they need to expand their system into rural communities. And we've shown flexibility with the provinces and territories. Not every province looks the same. Some have different challenges with very rural populations. Some have really dense urban populations. And we've been working with each province and territory to make sure that kids in that region also can benefit from quality care and parents can get the care they need.
20 seconds.
20 seconds. There is good collaboration between the federal level and the provinces. Yes, with all the provinces and territories. For example, in Quebec, there is a very strong program for child care. It is very well established, long standing. We supported it with funding for Quebec, but they have a very strong approach, and often the other provinces and territories are looking at what's going on with the Quebec program and draw lessons from that. Thank you, MP Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so yesterday, Minister Hodgson confirmed at committee that Cabinet actually votes on the projects that get referred to the Major Projects Office, which I think is an interesting space. My question to you is, do you support new pipeline projects? Yes or no?
So I've been really clear that I don't support hypothetical projects, but I support projects that are cleared by either a cabinet process or by the Major Projects Office. I think that it's important that projects go through a rigorous analysis on the measures that I indicated.
We have very limited time. Alberta is bringing forward a proponent to be a proponent on a pipeline project. It's not a hypothetical project. They have brought this to the government quite a few times. Do you support a pipeline project that will create thousands of important, good-paying jobs? Yes or no?
Again, there isn't a project in front of the table that has Alberta as the proponent for a pipeline. If there is, I look forward to the analysis. Look, I think it's important as politicians that we understand what we're saying yes or no to, and that has been my experience over the 10 years. Major projects come to Cabinet.
Thank you.
They are well analyzed.
I have very little time.
And then Cabinet makes a decision.
And I think it's a slap in the face to all Albertans that feel completely excluded by the fact that you guys have listed all kinds of projects right across the country and you've left out one region very, very mindfully. And that is the region of Alberta. That is the creator of a lot of jobs in this country. It is the driver of a lot of economic opportunity. As the minister responsible for jobs and families and social development, I would have thought you would be in favor of something that would create as many jobs. But you refuse to give hypothetical answers, and I will accept that.
No, this is not a hypothetical answer,
My
Mr.
next
Chair.
question is, Minister, have you specifically brought to the Prime Minister the baby formula inflation crisis?
Well, if I could just continue. In fact, Cabinet approved a pipeline. You'll remember the Trans-Canada pipeline. And then not only that, but when it was financially experiencing difficulty, we purchased the pipeline, and I was involved in those decisions. So I think that speaks for itself in terms of my flexibility to be able to support projects that are viable, that are in the national interest. And I would say that that is the approach that our government is taking. We believe that projects need to be viable, they need to be assessed, and the Major Projects Office is going to do that lift.
We have a very limited amount of time. So back to your portfolio, because you're not going to answer on this specific, very important question. But will you answer this one? Have you specifically brought forward the baby formula inflation crisis to Prime Minister Mark Carney, yes or no?
As I said earlier, and you asked this question before, the Prime Minister and I speak regularly on issues of affordability, and the measures in Budget 2025, which you voted against,
Minister,
would actually support families just like the one you're talking about. In fact, the woman in Thunder Bay that was quoted in CBC said that she could hardly wait till the 20th when her Canada Child benefit arrived.
Minister,
and yet, of course,
they're waiting on these things
this woman on
because they
disability
can't
would also benefit, hopefully, from our Canada
Chair,
Disability benefit. And at the end of the day,
Minister,
these are all measures that you voted against.
Do you think families should be able to afford to feed their own families? Yes or no?
Of course. But you quoted a woman in the House of Commons the other day, and the woman was on Ontario Disability and relied on the Canada Child benefit and specifically said that. And yet you
inflation
voted
on
against
baby
her very
formula has
interests.
gone up higher.
So when you are not advocating for all parents, including those that cannot work, I actually find this question a bit shallow. So quite frankly, what I say is,
Minister,
there are opportunities
there
for
is nothing
affordability
shallow.
in Budget
Minister,
2025.
Order,
No.
order, please.
And you voted against them time and again.
Ms. Goodrich, you have the floor. It's your question.
Thank you. There is nothing shallow in advocating for something. This has gone up by 84% in 8 years alone. This is something that's gone up way higher than any other food item in this entire country. This is something that is critical. Families are paying the price. They don't have a choice. There is nothing else that can be done. There are families that are literally forced to introduce milk, cow's milk earlier than recommended. They are introducing solid foods earlier than recommended because they cannot afford to feed their babies formula. They are buying what they know to be stolen baby formula. Baby formula is the #1 stolen food item in this country. And so what I am saying to you...
So is there a question?
Yeah,
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
My question to you is, have you brought this to the Prime Minister, yes or no?
As I have said, the Prime Minister is laser focused on affordability. You had a chance, Member of Parliament, to support struggling mothers, and you chose to walk away from them.
I support
every single
struggling
time
families and
people
all
say
families
we need
every
support.
Single
this
day.
government steps up, whether through a generous Canada Child benefit, whether it's supports for people living with disabilities, whether it's reducing childcare, whether it's making sure that we're there for people who are struggling.
Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Thank you, Minister. I give reasonable flexibility. We'll now move to Ms. Fancy for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Once again, I want to thank you, Minister, for coming today. I would be remiss as a rural advocate and researcher if I didn't ask you some questions regarding rural. Rural economies like mine in South Shore St. Margaret's feel national labour disruptions very quickly. And I'm wondering if you could highlight how the government's approach has actually helped maintain economic stability in regions of mine like South Shore while still supporting workers' rights.
Absolutely. Look, I think there are two ways. I mean, one, we've talked about, sectors that are deeply impacted by tariffs. And so in that approach, what we're doing is we're supporting companies and we're supporting workers. And that's really to primarily make sure that companies have the time and the breathing room to be able to pivot to new product, pivot to new markets. I would also say that in terms of you're talking about labor disruption, I think that's such an important component and why Section 107 exists in the code. Because a Minister of Labor's responsibility is, of course, to uphold the rights that are established for unions, for collective bargaining. But as you'll note in 107, the minister also has an important role to establish industrial peace. Now, as I said, 97% of disputes that arrive at the Federal Mediation Service don't require work stoppage. They are resolved through the diligence of both parties and the mediators who work to find a new collective agreement. But there are times where parties say they are at an impasse. In fact, that is what both parties said in the Air Canada dispute. Both the union said they were at an impasse, and the workers said, and the corporation said they were at impasse, despite all of the efforts of the Federal Mediation Service. And in that case, it was of my opinion that given both of their stated impasses, that we needed help from the Industrial Relations Board. The Industrial Relations Board, by the way, is an independent board that can provide advice to the minister, can provide advice to the parties, and sometimes can also resolve disputes.
Perfect. So in terms of regarding advice, I'd like to talk a little bit too about the conservative anti-union history that we have in this country. So compared to past governments that undermined those collective bargaining agreements, this government's taken a very strong pro-worker approach. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how that commitment has improved labor relations and helped support fair negotiations.
Well, I mean, I just don't think we would have seen the Canadian Building Trades Union standing beside us if they really felt that we were not pro-union. I mean, I think unions understand that, there is deep economic impact when there is, prolonged labor strife in this country, and everybody works really hard to prevent that. But what we have seen, and I have quote after quote after quote from unions, is that there is a respect for the work that we've done legislatively to improve unions' right to collectively bargain. I mentioned reversing Harper-era union-busting legislation, that we've made key changes to the labor code as well that increase protections for some of the most vulnerable workers in the workforce. And I do want to congratulate unions for the work that they do, not just for their members, but for the non-unionized members that often need the protection of, for example, paid sick days that we added to the Canada Labour Code. We've also, as you know, recently passed anti-scab legislation, something that unions have advocated for a very long time to see, and they stood with us as we were able to celebrate the passage of that bill, and I do thank all parties who voted for that legislation. But we've also invested in unions. We've invested in particular, building trades unions to build up the skilled trades members that we know we're going to need for these major projects. And what I can say is that unions understand that no government can be perfect. I mean, the idea of perfection is something we all strive for, but that we have to ultimately ensure that people are protected, wages are protected, pensions are protected, rights are protected, but that also we have industrial peace. And that's a balancing act, and that's what a Minister of Labour is required to do.
Thank you very much. And with my, 30 seconds left, I believe? 20. I also wanted to commend the modernization. So flipping a little bit, the modernization of your efforts with EI and OAS, because I know my constituents that are coming to my office that are needing help navigating systems. I have 4 university degrees, and sometimes it's hard to navigate some of these systems. So I can fully appreciate that these streamlined approaches that your ministry as well as CRA are taking to help streamline and modernize and help protect. I'm thinking seniors, predominantly reaching out to my office. I wanted to commend that, and hopefully there's more to come.
Thank you, Madame Fancy. Madame Gill, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Peut-être.
Ms. Gill, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Perhaps a couple of questions in 2 minutes, Minister, once again concerning persons with disabilities. Of course, we focused on the issue of housing. So we know that with housing, there's a home building program that's supposed to come through at some point. And I was wondering if there's something for persons with disabilities, whether they were consulted or organizations that advocate for them for adapted housing.
Certainly, that is a continued focus of our work, and I've been communicating with the Minister of Housing on the importance of ensuring that we have accessible units available for individuals. We also have the Accessibilities Act, which I'm responsible for monitoring, although that's more for federal buildings. We want to make sure that we can continue to advocate for the access of people with disabilities to all spaces.
Mm-hmm. And
of course, we're talking about adaptable housing rather than adapted housing, because there will be adapted housing, but also we have to ensure that there are homes that can be adaptable. That's what we're focusing on. To make sure people can hear us. Thank you.
Je suis désolée.
I'm sorry. My French is not that great, and I can try in French, but sometimes I don't choose the right words, but yes. And I have a lot of meetings with advocates
and
communities. Okay, so that's a yes. And then the last one, the employment insurance for natural caregivers. A lot of groups have talked to us about that because they are not able to benefit from benefits because their applications are refused simply because of administrative issue of checking boxes where they ask for a medical certificate and they ask whether it requires, not requires, but the natural caregiver or the person helping that person is in danger, or the person's life is in danger. I'm sorry, maybe I'm speeding up too much, but the natural caregiver, if their life is in danger, it's not always the case. You have natural caregivers in some situations where they're not able to benefit from the available assistance. So what are you going to make sure that that's changed so that accessibility can be there for all the people who may need it? Thank you, Chair. Minister.
Answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'd be happy to look into this and work with you on that.
Merci, Madame Gill. We'll conclude.
Thank you, MP Gill.
With Mr. Janis.
Minister, the UN has found that Track 2 MAID violates the rights of people with disabilities. Krista Carr from Inclusion Canada has testified that MAID is regularly raised with people with disabilities who are trying to access unrelated public services. Are you concerned about Krista Carr's testimony and the UN's findings?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I thought we were out of time, Mr. Chair. I was here for 2 hours, yeah.
Okay, I wonder if you can start my time again, Chair.
Sure.
The UN has found that Track 2 MAID violates the rights of people with disabilities. Krista Carr from Inclusion Canada has testified that MAID is regularly raised with people with disabilities who are accessing unrelated public services. Inclusion Canada hears complaints about this on a weekly basis, according to their testimony before the Finance Committee. Are you concerned about Krista Carr's testimony and the UN's findings in this regard?
What I would say is that medical assistance in dying is a deeply personal issue, and certainly we have heard from the disability community their concerns around medical assistance in dying. We've also heard from many other Canadians about the need to have relief from irremediable suffering, and that is a
I guess, Minister,
balance.
if I can just add some precision to the question. Krista Carr's testimony was about people who have disabilities and are seeking unrelated public services. So we're not talking about people who are asking for MAID. We're talking about people seeking unrelated public services who are having MAID proposed to them, offered to them. And I wonder if you think that's acceptable.
So, Mr. Chair, my job as Minister of Jobs and Families is to make sure that people with disabilities have every opportunity to participate in society that people without disabilities have. So I'm responsible for the Accessibilities Act. I'm responsible for the Opportunities Fund.
But Minister, again, if I can just clarify, the issue we're talking about is people coming seeking other public services. So people interacting with government. Who have disabilities. And there have been reports repeatedly raised by Inclusion Canada and other stakeholders about people trying to access those services. And you, as the person who's supposed to be a champion for Canadians with disabilities around the cabinet table, I think should be seized with this. I mean, do you think it's a problem that people trying to access unrelated public services are having people representing government in positions of authority repeatedly offering them something they're not looking for in this regard? Is that a problem?
If there is a non-medical professional offering medical assistance in dying, then that would be completely out of scope for the legislation. This is something that is a deeply personal decision between a medical provider.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, because this is what Krista Carr has said at the Finance Committee.
Listen, I have no reason to doubt any witness. I would would like to know details because, quite frankly, the legislation is quite clear. It's not.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate your response on that. I want to squeeze one more question in.
Medical professional would offer any individual, and that would be a violation.
Thank you, Minister. Just in the time I have left, I want to ask you, do you think the government's immigration policy decisions have contributed to youth unemployment?
I think it's important that young people have an opportunity to succeed in a market that's very tight. And what I can say is that what economists say is that it's a blend of things. They are definitely the canary in the coal mine when it comes to a worsening economy, and many dips have proven that. There is a change.
Do you think
in the
immigration
way
has
people are
contributed, though?
Some of the
it's just a very specific question. We don't have a lot of time. Do you think decisions made by the government as it relates to immigration over the last 10 years have contributed to this problem?
I think that the problem is complex, and I'm looking forward to my meeting later.
I'm not saying it's the only factor. Do you think it's one of the factors?
Colleagues.
Do you think it's one of the factors, though?
I think that there is a number of factors going into why youth are experiencing
is immigration
a higher
one of them?
unemployment rate, and that's why Budget 2025 has so many measures to support youth.
I'll just ask it again. Do you think immigration is one of those contributing factors to youth
I think there are
unemployment?
many factors that are going into why a young
I
person
agree there are
can't
many
find
factors.
a job.
Do you think immigration is one of them?
And that's why Budget 2025 has specific measures to alleviate
Do you
those
think
challenges.
Immigration is one of those factors, Minister?
I am saying there are multiple factors.
I agree there's multiple
and
factors. Is immigration one of them?
Economists have a number of perspectives. One of the biggest
But is immigration
things that's
one of those
affecting youth
factors?
unemployment, though, from an economist's perspective, is the
immigration
challenging
one of those
economic
factors?
times posed by tariff action. And I will say this, Mr.
Minister, is
Speaker,
immigration one of those factors?
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Your time has concluded. Your time. No,
I like how when he's like, yep. Like, in other words, stop talking.
Mr. Jonas will now conclude with Madame Katrakis to end.
Thank you, Minister. I thought that I would give you some uninterrupted time to perhaps speak to us about some issues that perhaps are very important for us to hear as a committee and for all Canadians who are watching right now. Are there some issues that you would like to speak to us about that we have not already touched upon today? And I wanted to sincerely thank you for all your answers. They've been wholesome and to the point. And I would like to offer you the rest of my speaking time to end this amazing committee meeting today.
Well, that's very generous. I think what I'd like to speak about is Budget 2025 and the transformational change that it represents for not just young Canadians, but for Canadians in general. In fact, you'll remember we were just in election 7-8 months ago. And what did Canadians talk about? They talked about their fear of what a changing relationship from a trade perspective with the United States would represent in their day-to-day lives. People were afraid of what it might mean for their jobs, for their families, for Canada's outcome. And there's a huge swell of nationalism and pride in Canada. And this budget actually meets the moment. It invests in the kind of building that will take us into the next generation, whether it's a major project, whether it is a clean energy project, whether it is a pipeline, whether it is a dam, whether it is expansion of roads or ports. Those things are the kinds of investments that Canadians know are not just job creation efforts, but they're wealth creators for Canada, and they allow us to diversify to other economies. The second thing I'll say is that budget invests in people. It is a care budget. There is a commitment to holding on to all of the things that make people's lives better. You talked about dental care. That is retained. You talked about early learning and childcare. That is retained. There's a commitment to make the National School Food Program permanent. That is a care commitment. There is a commitment to Canada student loans and grants, something that we know students need. There are commitments to continue with Canada Child Benefit and, in fact, continue to index it to inflation, something that these Conservatives are voting against and have voted against. And so while we see politics, rear its head and people talk about issues that they say are deeply important to them, what could be more important to a struggling mom than the ability to have a few extra dollars in her pocket? And why do I know that? Because I was a single mother. And I can tell you, as a single mother raising 2 boys, when you have a little bit of extra money in your pocket, regardless of where it comes from, it's money you spend on your kids. It could be for formula. It could be for karate. It could be so that you could take your kids to the movie, or maybe they need a new pair of shoes. And that's the discretion that these programs give parents. They give them the flexibility and the breathing room so that they can actually make decisions for their family. And when Conservatives vote against those kinds of things, they're voting directly against the extra dollars that a mom like me could desperately use. And I remember those days. There was a time where I worked 3 jobs. I worked full-time. I had a part-time gig as a graphic designer. Lots of people make fun of that work online. Many of our colleagues' supporters. But that was an important part-time job for me that supplemented my income. And I was a lunchroom supervisor. actually they called them monitors. So we would go in and help kids get their lunch. And that to me was a really important job in retrospect because, wow, now with a national food program, I can tell you that hopefully gone are the days where people have to scramble for an extra $2 so that a child they're watching doesn't feel left out from pizza day. And hopefully there's going to be less hunger in our schools.
Thank you, Madame Katrakis. That concludes this particular meeting. We'll meet again on Thursday, November the 27th as we begin the temporary foreign worker program. Madam Minister, thank you for appearing for the full 2 hours along with your staff before HUMA. Thank you. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn?
Okay. Like I said in chat quite a few times, we've got a little bit of a break until question period. We're not doing any committees in the afternoon just because there's nothing really interesting going on. So it's just going to be QP today, and then we'll be live tomorrow. So QP is going to be good today. We got Carney and Pierre in the house. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a break, 50 minutes until we tune into QP. Thank you so much, Wee Cookie and Just Me Nicole, for the super chats. I really appreciate you guys and everybody tuning in and watching. And here's the link again in chat for question period. And I will see you guys shortly. I'm going to go ahead and rewind and check Ogo to see if there was anything that we missed because Ogo was on at the same time. So I'll put that on the channel and hopefully I can get that out before question period. If I don't manage to do that just before question period, it'll be after question period. So check the playlist at the top of the channel, and there'll probably be some clips from Ogo if there was anything good that happened in it. So anyway, see you guys soon. Cheers.